Let's move on to the Q&A. I have a question from Suraj here, Professor. Do you think the recent passports have now become somewhat available and widely accessible? Was it because of the fact that liberalization uh, would allow labor migration to other countries like the UAE? This also helps with economic remittance and stuff, right? So, yeah, this is the question from Suraj.
No, I think excellent question. I just want to kind of make a point that some of the dates and the judgments that I might have mentioned might be a little argue because in the orality of things, some of these things get kind of a little muddled up. But the broad point stands that there was a very strong kind of a control on the passport, and then it was eased sometime 90s onwards. And I think the question or the comment that you're talking about by Suraj is actually a very excellently timed one, because that I do feel is what happened. I think there was a series of things that changed in India in the 90s. Okay. uh, India before the 90s and India during and after the 90s, in both cases, is a very Savarna dominated social structure, right? But the nature of that control and domination underwent a change itself. And I want to talk a little bit about that. Before the 90s, what was happening was we had this old, which remnant of the Nehruvian relic India that had created. And the Nehruvian production was a very interesting model. What they had done was Nehru and eventually Indira and like the Congress elite would sit in New Delhi. I think in many ways the Nehru Gandhi family uprooted themselves from UP. They were no longer UP leaders; they were national leaders. They just like went to New Delhi, and around them sat this coterie of very powerful secretaries and people like. If you look at their designations, they're not supposed to be very important, but they're very important because they're constantly in the ear and around these leaders. So they are like the Darbar, sort of a neo Darbar, which had started forming in Delhi. But at the regional level, what these parties were doing was what Congress was doing is in those days was giving regional autonomy. So they will go to a Haryana or they'll go to a Rajasthan, and there'll be like a dominant regional mass leader. And they would be like a deliver Rajasthan for me. So it was like a power sharing bargain agreement between regional chatraps and like this, New Delhi power center. So in those days, the cosmopolitanism, policy, elite jobs, not social media, all of these civil society, they were centered around few urban centers like Delhi, some in Bombay, some here and there. In those places, who was getting these jobs? It was mostly Savarna elites. You had to go to St. Stephen's, you had to go to Doon School. There was a very clear pipeline. So I don't think it is very dramatic to assert, but I feel like it's a very good marker. About 7 800 900 maybe 2000 families were running all of India, right? Because if you looked closely at them, one person is like recently I think Arundhati Roy's new, like yesterday I was seeing on Twitter, it was very revealing. I think her new book has come, and they did an intimate book launch where like some friends and family were called. And if you look at the gathering, it is who's who of Delhi literati. Like, Mamdani's mother, I think Meera Nair has reached there. And there is a photo of Pranoy Roy and Arundhati Roy, cousins. So one is a Booker winner writer, one is the, great NDTV anchor. Like, you didn't even know they were cousins, but they are like coming from similar families. I don't mean to just say about Arundhati Roy, but like almost every Savarna is like in that space is like that. One person is judge, uncle is in this place, that place. So these few elite families were all connected to each other. Everybody was known by 1 or 2 degree of separation, and they had in charge the entire policy apparatus within this framework. And this was truly their golden age of these elite liberal Savarnas. They could be left leaning, they could be rational, they could listen to English music, but they would also have, you can go anywhere, have all of these things. Now what started happening is in the 90s, the system that they had built came to a grind, started coming to a grinding halt. because of, people will say, oh, there was red tapeism and bureaucracy. Yes, there was, but also there was grand lack of accountability from institutions they had built. So eventually India had to kind of change its path and let the global capital, neoliberal capital processes inside. Now 30 years have happened since this has happened. 30-35 years. Now we can take an honest accounting of whether as a totally as a country, are we in a better place or are we not? In many indices of the marginalized populations of this country, these last 30 years have not been a great boon. They've actually further made them precarious, further surveillanced, and further marginalized. And who are these precarious populations? A large portion of them significantly are SC/ST OBC populations. So what neoliberal capital processes did was, it said that its hunger for trained labor was more than these 1,000 2,000 families could furnish. It needed 50,000 families, maybe, for instance, let's say, just throwing a number. So suddenly there was a rush. So there was a brief period in the late 90s to early 2000s where MBA boom happened, where you just got into a B school. They didn't care, like, what your background was, what anything was. You just got in. MBA fees used to be 3-4 lakh rupees. Job used to be 7-8 lakh rupees in those days, right? So it was a fantastic scheme. But around 2007-8 के आसपास, that gap in the trained worker pipeline sort of started stagnating. After that, you see in India the MBA program, the tech program, all of these, they've started giving diminishing returns, to the point where, nowadays, engineering students are still making the same kind of money they made in 2005, but the cost of engineering programs has gone up 5x. So it's actually not a very good life now for engineering or MBA students in India. But that's because this is kind of market has kind of gotten saturated. And the Savarna systems have not really expanded the consuming market beyond the top 7-8 metros of the country. So for the top 7-8 metro cities, the amount of trained MBAs, techies, and whatever you want to call it, they already have it now. So in many ways, this is kind of sort of slowed down, where this is where you see the Indian growth story slowing down. But part of the neoliberal processes that started coming into India in the 90s was, you have to allow for fluid mobility of labor and fluid mobility of capital. But it would also coincide with a period of extraordinary, I would say, Bahujan mobilization in the political arena. These things are not just happening for economic reasons. If you look at this period from 1995 till about 2008 2009, not just BSP, but even regional parties like RJD, Samajwadi Party, DMK, even many of them coming from landed OBC communities who have themselves a troubled relationship with scheduled caste populations, but they were also very ideologically assertive. This is the period where India goes from 3 or 4 IITs to 20 IITs. They expand the IIM system. They start opening central universities across different states. A lot of this is not happening only because capital demands, trained intellectual bodies. Yes, that is there, but it is also an ideological assertion which is happening. Mandal, protests are happening. Then the Savarnas are fighting back with Youth for Equality movement. They are defeated. OBC reservation happens, and then they start doing the private university. So there's a constant churning going on. So part of these processes is the opening up of things like passport, opening up of things like that. In many which ways, you can still see these processes nowadays. I'm hearing from all my Savarna friends, they're all buying up houses in UAE or Dubai or somewhere, because like they don't want to buy property in Delhi or Bombay, because they're saying, oh, now Delhi is unlivable, Bombay is unlivable, we will live in Dubai or Qatar. So who made Delhi and Bombay unlivable? Who were the policy experts who were consulting? Who were the people who, politicians don't decide the policy of smart city. They know how to win elections. They know how to announce big budget things. You are the people, you are the class of people who were designing the policies. You had no problem living in gated communities and taking over public civic and seeing the civic disruption of community life in cities. Now those cities are predictably unlivable, so now you're running away, right? So in many which ways, this is a culmination of processes, I would say, not just limited to one thing. I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
I was more wondering about the like whatever you said. It makes so much sense when it comes to the idea of passports being one of the reasons where it allows people to migrate, and especially for because I came to also know that the flights to UAE or like those countries where you need more migration is kind of subsidized by the other flights which goes to more touristy places. So it seems like, and also there was like campaigns where Indigo would, in small cities would like do, okay, we'll not just give you like if you want to go somewhere for like work, you don't like you don't have to worry about the travel agency, you don't have to worry about passport. We'll give the ticket and the passport together as well, right? But also like passport was expensive, so it was like something that we couldn't afford as well. So I was wondering if those, and also like the airport industry that boomed after liberalization, because what is the use of airports if you don't have like enough passports for the people to like through to other countries. So I was, yeah, but yeah, it makes so much sense what you said in this regard. Yeah.
Right. No, I'll just quickly make a comment on that also. I don't know about the Indigo thing about passport with ticket. This first time I'm hearing it. If it is really there, it's very fantastic. No, but the UAE, also Middle East, you have to understand, India has a large Muslim population. For a lot of marginalized Muslims, this has been their traditional economic migration route,
Hmm.
because many sectors of Indian economy, and this is not controversial to say, are not very open for Muslim labor. So they have been historically going in. So if you go to Kerala, for instance, like, or go to an airport like, the
Hmm.
Kozhikode airport in Kerala, like it is a very big international terminus, is very big because a large number of people going to the Middle East for economic labor reasons, and they're working there for 7 8 years. Basically, you're paying for some kind of social mobility with years of your life, right? You're making money, you're accruing some wealth, then you're coming back, building a house in your like 50s. That's the dream. You've given up a whole life
Hmm.
to kind of live for a few years in that house.
Right.
And as a Punjabi, like our migration routes were different. We went to different parts of the country. So the economic labor migration, like Indians have always been the especially the SC/ST OBC people have always been sent out as sort of dispensable labor,
Right.
in these
Right.
places.
Right.
And we were always also the first to be beaten, pushed down, sent back, ghettoized in these spaces. Like their
Hmm.
descendants don't go and become the prime minister of UK. That is a very
Right.
different class of Savarna migration.
Right.
So in many which ways, that's the thing that we are seeing. Like there are different kinds of labor which migrated in the colonial times also to Africa, but only a certain group will become prime minister of
Do
UK,
you have
not.
any sources on this, like anything written on this, like any good uh, resources on like reading materials on like migration patterns in from different castes and classes to other countries, which is kind of an interesting question in itself.
um
Yeah.
Well, very little work has happened on this, but
Right.
I haven't read it. But I think Suraj Yangde's new book is talking about it a little bit. Caste and Global Story. I think that's the pitch of it.
Okay.
Uh, Apart from that, it'll be research papers here and there. There'll be like some scholar working in the Caribbean, and how caste has happened. So Caribbean is a very interesting formation because not a lot of Brahmins went to the Caribbean islands. It was mostly marginalized caste labor. So there they have
Mhm.
retained the names and the whatever rituals, but like they've integrated in ways, in other places it has not happened, I think. So we are fully yet to understand some of these processes, and hopefully more people do research like this. Yeah.
Yeah, thank
Thank you.
you,
Thank you.
Professor. Thank you, Suraj. We still have 2 more minutes, 2 to 3 minutes. You want to take one question quickly, one more? Okay, yeah, we have a question from Karthik. Since there is a somewhat of a mass migration by the Savarnas to abroad, do you think this will eventually lead to a OBC, SC/ST led revolution in India? You are muted, Professor.
Very quickly, since we are running short of time, and there is another question which is about anti-caste legislation in the US. I think, in the chat box. So let me respond very quickly. I think in many which ways these are related questions. So I don't think that the wait, hold on. Okay. I don't think that the migration of Savarnas abroad will change the material realities in India. We have a template for this. If you look at South Asia, Pakistan is actually a fantastic case study to look at how, because Pakistan itself doesn't see itself as a caste society. It is very much a caste society. It is a tribal country. And again, there are like some 800 families who are historically feudal landlords who control everything from military to economy and all that. Many of whom have now settled abroad. The Pakistani elites, I think, exited the country in the 90s, but their control over the material reality of the country has not changed. They will still own the properties. They will still own some of the companies. What will change in India is like these cafes will disappear. When all the Savarnas are living in Dubai and Singapore, then you don't need 15 cafes which serve macaroons and tarts and things like that. So that number of cafe will come down to, maybe it'll be like how it was in the 80s and 90s. There's one bakery in one part of the city which is selling something, or there's one kind of a fine dining restaurant. So that is what will change, but the actual control will not shift. Politically in India, these communities will try to assert more. There is definitely a move towards a quote unquote Bahujanizing of Savarna parties. The cost of staying in power, the electoral consensus that a party like BJP is finding out, is they have to increasingly sort of give space to these other castes within the framework. At what point does it stop then being a Savarna party? So I think that point is going to come very soon, and then we don't know how they will react. I don't think they naturally erode themselves into non-existence. There will be some sort of a backlash. There will be some sort of a counter coup. There will be some sort of it's an existential thing for them. So, and in South Asian example, whenever we've seen things like this, it has never really ended in good ways. And I don't mean to be sounding alarmist, but India is the only country in South Asia which has not yet seen a military intervention. In a lot of these places, military is very closely linked to the caste interest of the political economy of these places. So I don't know. I hope I'm very wrong, but I don't think that the material reality changes, and I don't know what the repercussions of that long term are. And connecting that to the quick question by Mayank Rangari also, which is attempts to sabotage anti-caste legislation in the US, which is very, very understandable, because like I said in my talk also, for a lot of Savarnas, expanding abroad is a natural extension of their self. So when you go there and you try to legislate caste, they will push back at it. And although I'm not an expert in following that, but what I really understood was, they like last minute they just pulled on the governor of California, and they just like talked about lobbying money, and then like that's how it works. You do a grassroots movement, they do a funding political motivated, and in the US political system, that's what counts. So I think there are limits to some of these political mobilizations. Every effort, every resistance is a learning. So I think everybody will learn, like even the anti-caste mobilization in the US will learn from this. And let's see how we move on from there. But yeah, definitely they will not welcome it. They will, it's very existential. And I will even go as far as to say one quick point, that the emergence of so many right-wing coded Indian origin politicians in US, Canada, UK, I don't think it is accidental. I think this was deliberately incepted in many which ways. Close links have been formatted, and that would happen if 99% of Indian origin people going abroad historically have been Savarnas. Many of the Savarnas come from these right-wing networks also. These have been incepted. So to challenge them on caste is cutting very close to the bone, and there will be a pushback on it consistently. That is something we have to anticipate and prepare for. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor. It was really wonderful having you talk here today with us.